Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week, I got to chat with actor Jason Altman. He plays Officer Herman on Netflix Orange is the New Black. His character led the security team that ended the riot last season, and he reoccurs in season 6. We had a fun time talking about his audition for the role, his approach to acting and how it's changed over the years, and the remake he'd most like to do. Hope you enjoy. So, Orange is the New Black. I've watched the first, 4 or so of the new season, and you play Officer. Is Officer the title, or are you just Herman?
Originally, it was Cert Officer Herman, and now they're just calling me Herman. As you'll see later in the season.
Can you talk a little bit about auditioning for Orange is the New Black and getting that role? Were you already a fan of the show, or?
Yes. I was a huge fan of the show from the very beginning, actually. It was a show actually my wife and I watched together because we each have our own favorites, but it was definitely one of the mutual favorites of ours. And so that was pretty amazing to join it. But as far as auditioning for it, the casting directors, I was on their radar a little bit, but I was never called in for Orange. And then I was called in for one of the smaller Cert Officer roles in the season. And I went in and auditioned and met them for the first time. And then the next morning, they called me early in the morning to come in that day and read for Herman, and then 5 big scenes to memorize in a couple of hours. And I went back in that afternoon, and I found out a few hours later that I had gotten it. They called me directly.
Was that unusual auditions to get that much material, to get that many sides?
I would say that, most of the time, if you're going to have that type of material, it would be about 24 hours before, usually on average. Because it is, sometimes that happens, especially, during pilot season. I've heard of actors getting 6 scenes 2 hours before their audition or their callback. But typically, you usually have a day to prepare in advance. Yes.
Herman as a character, even just in the limited bit that I've seen from the season finale, from the riot-ending raid, is a pretty cold-blooded, kind of deliciously dark character. Is that particularly fun to play, and is it hard to kind of tools down at the end of the day from being that character?
Yes, it's very fun to play a bad guy and a villain. I think more than other type of roles. That being said, it's also it is hard to tool down at the end of the day because this show represents real life, and there are people actually out there, like officers out there, and other people out there that are just like that. It's hard to actually. Even more so now that the season has come out and things have developed with this kind of cold-blooded character, it's really hard to think about it, that people are like this and that cold-blooded and willing to well, first off, just they think about themselves first, and they're willing to do anything, even if it includes hurting other people to succeed in life and to not go down, in that sort of way.
Yeah.
But as an actor, in terms of just being an actor, yes, it's very fun playing the bad guy.
What was your first real joy that you found in acting? What was the first role or thing that got the bug going?
Well, as far as the bug goes, I started by doing a lot of theater professionally, like off Broadway and off Broadway, and it just was a real thrill being on stage and feeding off of the audience. I had some success as a basketball player throughout high school, and when I would compare the feeling of being on stage to playing in front of a large crowd cheering for you, It's kind of like a natural high, actually. And I think that it really just hit me with the theater. And it kind of, as I developed as an actor and continued getting more parts on screen, I think that it just got ingrained in me of really just loving the process of it and loving the payoff of it. I really think it was probably when I first started acting professionally at 20 years old, and it really hit me right away, especially with all the plays that I was doing. I just consistently craved to do more projects and to jump into these roles, and it was really a lot of fun, and I just fell in love with it right away.
And you had gotten some success playing Edgar in Lear.
Yes.
Was that in college?
I was college-aged. It was a New York City off-Broadway theater called the American Theater of Actors, and that was my first foray into Shakespeare. I had no Shakespeare training prior to that, but the director was a teacher who used to teach at the Actors Studio in New York, and he owned the theater, and he believed in me to play. Edgar is a great historical role in Shakespeare, and
yeah, that's a great role.
It was phenomenal. I had a lot of fun because Edgar gets lost, and he's banished from his family, and he gets kind of lost in the woods for years, and kind of becomes that primal animal-like human, and it was really fun to play that. Even on that level, it's probably fun to play it on any level. But it was one of the best roles I've ever played and ever will.
I've seen productions of Lear where Edgar got the final lines, and I've seen productions where he kind of mills about. Do you remember how y'all?
Yes,
how y'all ended it?
I had the final lines. It was great. It was I remember that very well. I was up on it was kind of in this back outdoor cement theater, like outdoor theater. It's called the Outdoor Theater in the American Theater of Actors. And I climbed up this ladder, and it was really great. I was like kind of screaming out to the skyline of New York City. So it was really a fantastic ending. And yes, I did end up with the final lines there. He is the hero, one of the heroes of that show.
This might be an odd question, but have you ever gotten any particularly bad career advice from well-meaning folks of like, you know what, you should stop doing you and do a different thing? Have you ever gotten any just really weird off-base advice?
I probably have. I just have to kind of think for a minute to think about that. I had been getting a lot of small 1 or 2 line roles on a lot of big series, TV series shot here in New York, and I ended up doing like a dozen of them. Of these small, like one scene roles, like Cop number 2 and U.S. Marshal number 4. And I think that after I had done a handful of those, I probably should have stopped and just said to the casting offices, "No, I am done. I'm only playing." I don't want to call every role is a real role, but as far as acting is concerned, you don't really get to stretch yourself with a 2-line cop role. So I think that's maybe it wasn't bad advice that I had received, but I wasn't getting any guidance for a while. And finally, after I had done several more of them, I got some good advice, just saying you got to stop doing this and you have to let them know that you're only interested in playing real juicy characters. And luckily, Herman came up shortly after I made that decision of stopping doing all the small roles.
What's the best thing you figured out for yourself in terms of prepping yourself for roles and acting? Has there been any part of your routine that you look at now and think, man, I'm glad I've got that down?
Yes, definitely. Well, as I mentioned earlier, in the beginning of my career, I didn't have any acting technique, or I didn't study acting techniques. I thought, I'm talented, I'm going to go get him, and I'm going to get every role, and this is going to be easy. And luckily, I did get some roles. As you mentioned, I was very lucky to have been cast in King Lear, and I did the Baccha. I did some classics, which really helped as far as experience was concerned. And experience is a great teacher. But up until my mid-20s, I was just going on basic instinct, and it really wasn't paying off. especially in the transition from theater to television and film. But then I really got serious, and I spent 3 years really rigorously studying the Meisner Technique at the William Esper Studio, which is really dedicated to the Meisner Technique. And it really gave me a lot of structure and a toolkit as far as how I prepare my roles and how to really get to the honesty of the character, is the most important thing for the audience to really buy into you and the story. So I think that for those 3 years that I was studying Meisner, it really was a real awakening for me as far as acting is concerned. I feel like I made a huge jump as far as the way people viewed my acting, and even in the way I prepare and my confidence and just the overall makeup of my career. Everything changed after those 3 years.
I was looking at your resume, and I guess 3 years ago or so, you did a short, Amber, where you were writer-director and in it. Can you talk a bit about what prompted you to, have you always written, or what prompted you to want to step to the other side of the camera?
I was feeling a little stuck in my film and television career, and I had read so many stories about actors succeeding by making their own material, especially like if you look it up, Vin Diesel even and Billy Bob Thornton, they a whole bunch of actors who like have had a huge success in movies and television started by making their own independent film and getting it out there into festivals. And I just really had kind of like an instinct one day to start writing short films. So I wrote a few actually, and I was able to get this one made because I had a few, investors interested in doing it and friends who were in film and television as far as behind the scenes. Like I had a cinematographer friend who directed me in a student film years before, who had some success in the festival circuit, wanting to jump on board. And I was able to get Amber made, and it was a really an amazing creative experience. It was a 15-minute short film. I went to New Filmmakers New York Film Festival and a few other small festivals here in New York. And I directed, and I was acting in it, and I wrote it. So overall, as far as creative fulfillment, it was one of the most fulfilling moments of my career as well. As far as my experience directing, I might jump back. It wasn't such a bad experience for me. I definitely, my passion lies in the acting more so than directing and writing, but it was a great experience to have. I made a lot of connections through it. I'm happy with the way it turned out. I just don't know when it's going to happen again, but yes, I'm very proud of Amber and the people that were involved with it. So yes, it was a good moment to have back. It was 5 years ago that I started production on that, and it was a few years running the whole process because it took a while to edit and it took a while to get into certain festivals. But it was something that I would definitely revisit in the future. As far as, and I'm constantly working on short films, even as we speak. So it's a good outlet creatively when I'm not booking roles in TV and film and doing plays.
Do you feel like it gave you an additional bit of insight going back to acting, as a better understanding rather of what the whole set's doing, what everybody's parts are? Absolutely.
I think that it gives you the point of view of the other people, especially in the crew that you're working with, like the hecticness of being a director and a producer and the writer and the lead actor. It gives you a whole understanding of the way things work, that it's not just about you and your performance. There's a whole puzzle going on to complete. It's a film or a television episode, or there's so much going on, so many aspects and so many different roles on the crew that it definitely gave me huge understanding about it. Absolutely.
Do you have a dream role or a project that you've always wanted to be a part of? Did you have something you watched as a kid that, wow, if they remade that, I'd love to be?
I never really had that dream project or specific role that I dreamed about doing. I always thought, and I still think that the most important thing for me is, like, I really want to do juicy roles like this role. And I mean, not to spoil anything, as you'll see, is very integral to a very intense storyline that's going on in Orange. But I think the most important thing for me is definitely, I just want to be involved with really affecting stories. However, something hit me last night. I remember a movie that I saw growing up called They Live. I mean, it's not a it's not a critically acclaimed.
John Carpenter's They Live is amazing.
Yeah.
Though. Yeah.
Like, I would love to do a remake and play the Roddy Piper role. I think it would be a good film to remake now, 30 or so years later. In this time of the world, I think it would be a great remake, and I would love to play that role because I thought he was great in that.
He really was. I mean, considering that. I don't think he'd had any real previous acting experience other than wrestling itself. Of course, you've got to keep the ridiculously long fist fight scene.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's got to be the bubblegum line in the fist fight scene.
And for those who are listening who haven't watched the end of the season 6 of Orange, you'll see later on that I got some good training in the fist fighting area.
Well, I can't wait to finish out the season. I enjoyed it last year and was glad to see Herman come back. You knew this season would be clean up from the riot, but it's just been thrilling so far to see how it's all weaving together. Have you got anything coming up after Orange that you're particularly excited about?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm working on a few short films in development right now, going into production on a short film, which I'm actually not sure if I'm allowed to speak of just yet next month, but another spoiler alert for those listening. I'm hoping, depending on the way the writing goes, to be back in the 7th season of Orange, but just hitting the pavement and auditioning for the 50 or so different TV shows that are shot in New York here, and waiting to see what's next see what this role in Orange brings,
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate talking to you, man.
You as well. Thanks so much.
Bye.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Electric Sweater Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener-supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/tvdudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter @TVDudes. All the music for our show is by our friend and original TV dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and electricsweater.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.